It's February, which means it's officially Black History Month. And at the special report, we are here for it. From the creator of this month's long celebration, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, to those whose life work is to preserve that history, we are amplifying the voices of African American change makers. You'll meet some of these amazing folks coming up next.
Live from Los Angeles, this is the Special Report with Areva Martin.
In the second week of February in 1926, Harvard scholar and activist Dr. Carter G. Woodson kicked off the first ever Negro History and Literature Week, which later became Negro Achievement Week. Dr. Carter chose this week because it fell on the birthday of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. He hoped that doing so would encourage teachers and historians to participate, since they would likely already be planning celebrations for these historical figures. Dr. Woodson wanted Americans to go further than Lincoln and Douglass and get curious and learn about all parts of Black life. Because of his work, many schools began adding more curriculum about Black history, and Black history clubs began popping up across the country. Dr. Woodson hoped that this week-long celebration would eventually turn into an ever-present appreciation and education about Black life. Black History Month became official in 1976. Fast forward to today, Republican state legislators in states from Arkansas to Iowa are passing legislation to ban the accurate teaching of Black history and the history of institutionalized racism in this country. My guests today are on a mission to fill the void for those students who are being forbidden from learning the true history of America, of African Americans, the scourge of state-sanctioned racism, and its impact on their daily lives. Here for my lead-off discussion are Shirley and Bernard Kinsey. They are art collectors, philanthropists, and founders of the Kinsey African American Art and History Collection, an award-winning museum exhibition. I'm proud to say they're also friends and fellow church members of mine. Good morning and welcome, Shirley and Bernard.
Well, good morning and welcome to you.
Great to see both of you. I know you, along with your son Khalil, are the founders of this amazing exhibition that celebrates the achievements of Black Americans from the formation of the U.S. to the present. So I'll start with you, Shirley. Why in this climate, this highly partisan climate that we find ourselves in, attacks on critical race theory, attacks on teaching about accurate Black history, is an exhibit and a collection like yours so important?
Well, Areva, right now, our collection, by the way, is at Pepperdine University, being displayed there until March 27th, and we encourage and invite all to come out and see it. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. But for me, as a former teacher, and Khalil, by the way, was born the year after it became Black History Month, and he was born the year of Roots, and for us, we had to learn more about who we are so we could teach him. And as a teacher, I always found there was never enough information to go around to talk about Black Americans during Black History Month. And as Dr. Carter wanted, throughout the year. So we're hoping that our exhibit being shown somewhere throughout the year will give kids a chance and people a chance to understand what this is all about. Because after all, it is American history, not just for Black folks.
Yes, so true. Sure. Bernard, I want to ask you, you guys have this really interesting story about how you met and how this exhibit came to be. So tell us briefly, I think it's such a charming story.
Well, we're both HBCU graduates from Florida A&M. We met in 1963. Matter of fact, this week we're celebrating our 55th anniversary.
Wow, and, congratulations.
We moved to Los Angeles in 1967, first home in Crunch in Inglewood. And oh, by the way, we're opening, last week we opened the second Kinsey Collection exhibit at SoFi Stadium, and we were there for Super Bowl. So that will be there through Juneteenth. So we're at Pepperdine now, and we're also at SoFi. Well, we met, Shirley was arrested in 1963, demonstrating at Florida A&M, and I had a role in helping the students. I was an upperclassman 2 years ahead of her, kind of navigate getting out of school, keeping their scholarships, things like that. And we just hit it off. And it's been almost 58 years that we've been together. since FAMU, and it's just been a blessing.
Okay.
And I think yesterday was Shirley's birthday.
Oh,
So it's I tell people all the time, if you get your partnership right, almost everything else will work in your life. And we've been partners since basically '63, and it's just really been it's been a good run.
Well, happy birthday and early congratulations on your 55th wedding anniversary. So let's talk about this. How did you get this exhibit going? I mean, this is quite an endeavor. So what prompted you, first of all, to start collecting these artifacts?
Well,
we had been collecting, I say everybody else's culture in early years of our marriage because we traveled quite a bit.
We travel a lot.
And we were always interested in indigenous culture wherever we went. But we realized we didn't know enough about our own. And having left Florida in our early young adult years, we thought we were leaving all that behind. Well, you can never really leave it behind because it's always with you. And really, after Khalil was born was when we really kind of started focusing on our culture. And I always say I want kids to understand that it's more than, even though they get Dr. King and Parks and Frederick Douglass and everybody, there are more people who did things. I want schools to understand that. I want our kids to know that, and I want everybody's kids to know that, because that's important to who we are and what our contributions are to this world. And that's really kind of how we got started. Started collecting art first, met a lot of local artists, became friends, had art shows at our house actually, to introduce them to our friends and neighbors. And it just kind of grew from there. Then in 2005, the LA Times asked to do an article on what they thought our home was architecturally well done. And they wanted to do an article on that. Well, when they got there, they said, this is more than art. More than just a house. This is a home filled with art and history. And the title of the article was, These Walls Talk. These Walls Do Talk.
Do talk, yeah.
Which they were doing. And when Khalil was growing up, we always knew when his friends came over, Bernard would do a history lesson and they wouldn't want to leave. So at some point we knew it was touching kids, young people. They'd want to come back and bring their friends, tell their parents about it. And when CAM, California African American Museum, called and asked if we would display it for about 3 months because they needed content and they were trying to get other African American collectors to show their work. We said yes and thought that would be, 3 months and it's coming back home.
One and done.
Well, museums kept calling. 15 years later.
Wow.
It's become a joy, and to have Khalil totally involved with this.
Yeah, well, he's general manager, curator and general manager. So we've been doing it now 15 years.
Let me ask you this, Bernard. Let me ask you this. How big is the collection now since you've had 15 years to curate it?
We have over 700 pieces. Art and history. Our earliest document starts in 1595 with a baptismal certificate from St. Augustine, Shirley's hometown, of a young African-American girl named Estabana. We have a 1598 marriage certificate. So, and if you come out to either Pepperdine or SoFi, you get a chance to see these actual documents. But these are the oldest known documents documenting the existence of African Americans in the United States before Jamestown. So before Jamestown was founded in 1607, we have 3 documents that predate Jamestown. And that's one reason why you want to come. We have paintings that began in 1865 that African American painters. So we have 5 of the top 6 Black masters that painted in the 19th century. So what we've done over the last 35, 40 years is meticulously documented by acquiring pieces that tell the historical record of America. So when we tell you, we ask to tell you about Dred Scott, we have the Dred Scott decision. On Brown versus Board, we have Brown versus Board. On Phyllis Wheatley book, we have Phyllis Wheatley. On the first play written by an African-American, Clotilda. Or the first book written by an African in 1600. So when you come, you're going to get a lesson that you won't get anywhere else, because what we do, we expose to the world through a concept called management by FACTS, facts, that we not only were there, we mattered, we contributed, and there's a concept called myth of absence that essentially ensured that Black people were cut out of all of the historical record of America. So myth of absence says that we're there, but we're not part of the narrative. We're not part of the picture. And what we do is put African Americans back into that picture. It's something as simple as blue jeans, dungarees. They could not happen had we not had enslaved people, bringing that process from Africa, showing how to make indigo and to create this beautiful blue dye. I mean, Washington, D.C. would not be here if it weren't for Benjamin Banneker. He not only did the first scientific book, he also laid out Washington, D.C. The Statue of Freedom on top of the Capitol, Philip Reed in 1856, he's the guy that figured out how to do that. And we go on with seven, I mean, it's pretty amazing. Yeah. The Green Book,
AAA for Black folks.
AAA for Black folks, because you couldn't travel. We have that. Madam C.J. Walker, if you name the period, we have 6 periods, starting with transatlantic. And we go all the way through civil rights and modern day. And that's what we want people to come out. We have the Kinsey Collection book. I'll just show you this on our website, thekinseycollection.com. You can also get it, at the museum. But it started out pretty innocently, and now it's a serious effort that we all.
Well, let me ask you something, Shirley. You're a former teacher, and you know the 1619 Project, the award-winning, Pulitzer Prize-winning 1619 Project. How infuriating is it to know that you have documents of African Americans being in this country before 1619? You said records going back to 1607, and to see this resistance to that project and to the facts that Black people were here as early as the 1600s.
It's sort of, it actually hurts my heart, because I thought that we were further along than this. And I certainly had prayed and hoped and wished that we would be further along than this. And so it's quite painful to know that this still exists. I mean, when I think about folks saying, no, this we don't want our kids knowing about this, because that's literally what they're saying. And I'm saying, wait, we want to give our ancestors a voice, a name, and a personality, just like your ancestors. You know more about them than you know about us. Mm-hmm. Our son Khalil always says that if all I know about you, most of your ancestors were positive things, and most of the things you know about me, my ancestors were negative. You think they were enslaved, and that's all they were. There's more to it than that. Right. Yeah, not just enslaved. Yeah. We were human beings.
No, absolutely. I think that's an excellent point. But now let me ask you what the biggest obstacle is that you guys have faced in getting these, because you're talking about some documents that rare, only one exists in the entire country, and you guys have been able to get your hands on some of these rare artifacts and documents. What's been the biggest obstacle?
The biggest thing is really, you first of all, I tell people, read before you collect. Because the only way you can train your eye is to know the story. So I read 2 hours a night for the last 50 years. I mean, history and about investing. So, and first of all, you need to get the dollar part of this thing right to be able to do what we've done. We've been to 103 countries. And as we have done this travel starting as early as in the 60s, we really began to see the connection between Black folks and Indians and Inuits and Africa and the South Pacific and South America. I mean, and it just jumped out at you. You said, look, it all started in Africa, in Ovi Gorge. So we began to go back, and some of the documents like Leo Africanus, it's a book written in 1600 in English, and this is not even the first edition. The first edition is 1550, and it's written by an African about Africa before slavery decimated. So we start there and we say, look, we come from a place of sunshine and hope and science and medicine, astronomy and greatness, not the country, the continent that we're always described as a dark continent. And when you think about it, if you take 12 to 15 million people from a continent like we are those ancestors, we would be the kings and queens in Africa if we were there today. And that's part of why Africa has the problem, because all of its genius moved to the Western Hemisphere. And I'm starting from Argentina all the way to Canada. Canada was the only country in the Western Hemisphere that didn't take people. So I love Canadians for that reason. And if you start thinking about it, the prevalence of the African diaspora in 1852, Buenos Aires had 52% of the population Black. In Peru in the 1600 with Pizarro and the Inquisition, the city was called a Black city. We have a document from 1604 from Peru talking about Black folks. Or Mexico had more Black people than Mexicans in the 17th century. So when you have these documents in front of you, you're trapped by the truth we said. And all we do is let the document speak to you. You know, we have a document, 1829, of the second president of Mexico, Vicente Guerrero, who is he's of African descent. And you see the brother's picture, you can see, he's Black. Right. He abolished slavery in 1830. And so check this out. In America, we had to have a war to end slavery. And we still haven't ended it because everything that's going on now has been repeated. This voter suppression, the kind of police stops and people getting killed, and a little kid got killed the other day, that comes right out of slavery, where white people were commissioned to go out and hunt Black people. So the idea in this country that we're still not operating on rules, practices, laws, and habits of thought is just ridiculous. And the only way you can clean that up is you have to know your history. And that's what we do every day.
Shirley, Bernard mentioned the police brutality and some of the things that we see in modern day times. I want to ask you about George Floyd's murder in 2020. Did the murder and the aftermath, the protests, and all of the commitment to understanding Black history more and becoming anti-racist, did that impact the work that you all are doing, or impact, your ability to travel with the exhibit?
Well, I should say, I'm going to say no right now because, COVID was going on. Mm-hmm. We actually stopped traveling in
March of 20. Yeah, we had a big show in Dallas.
Yeah. And we had just come back we've been to Colombia, actually.
Bogota.
U.S. State Department had us come down to Colombia and speak to Afro-Colombians about our work and what we're doing and trying to establish something there. And we just come back and COVID hit. And so anything that was on the books then was canceled.
But are you noticing, I guess what I'm asking is, are you noticing an increased interest in your work as the aftermath of George Floyd's murder?
Yes and no. The museum business is the most racist business still in America, in my opinion. Because all you have to do is go to a museum, a white museum particularly, and just ask them, show me your collection of African-American artists. If they have them, they don't show them, or they don't have them at all. Secondly, just look and see the last time they had an African-American show. That's all you ask. You know what I mean? And that's what we do in every museum we go into. And I tell you, and I don't even worry about it anymore. We've been to 35 cities. We've had 15 million people see the Kinsey collection. So we don't spend any time on it anymore. All we do is say, we go where we invited the people that are ready for this information, the way we present it, we're ready to come. But what we would like to see is all of these museums. We have 14,000 museums and libraries in America, and most of them are closed to the African-American story. You know what I mean? You go to a library and just ask about the books. You go to Pepperdine, to their credit, because of the Kinsey collection, they went out and bought all the African-American books that you could ever think about. And it's in the library now. So now kids at Pepperdine for the first time will be able to go and access this information in real time. Most places wouldn't do that, okay? So, we had a 5-year run at Epcot at Disney. Can you believe this? Disney, okay? We had 10+ million people see the Kinsey collection there. We had 67,000 employees of Disney go through the Kinsey collection because it's the best way, when we talk about diversity and inclusion, the best diversity and inclusion is understanding the story of accomplishment and achievement of African Americans in building this country. And that's what we use as the predicate for the last 35 museums that we've gone in. And I tell you, if you have been at Pepperdine on Sunday, we had about 300 people to hear the myth of absence talk. So we're going to invite everybody to come out to Pepperdine on January 19th for our opening, our grand opening starting at 12 o'clock 3 o'clock, we're having the myth of absence. I would love for you to hear this because it's going to change how you think about what we did as a people. Because what we do by exposing you to these wonderful people and what their accomplishments are, is you become to fill that hole that you have in the heart. Because literally every Black person in this country has a hole in their heart because they don't know who they are and they don't know where they came from.
January, Bernard, you mean February 19th?
February 19th. I appreciate you saying that. February 19th. I don't know where I get, well, it's just,
okay.
you know.
Shirley, let me ask you this. I want to ask you, what has someone said that has seen this collection that resonated with you the most?
We just got a letter from a guy that we don't even know. Second time we got a letter like this. A Jewish guy, when we did the Smithsonian, we had 2.5 million people see the Kinsey collection in the Smithsonian.
There were 7 months there.
Just so you know. So the Jewish guy was there, and I remember him, I can see him in my heart right now. He writes, he said, this was the best day of my life. That's one letter. And just last month, the AAA magazine did a big feature on the Kinsey collection in Tacoma, Washington, which we had a fabulous show just closed. And
at a white museum.
At a white museum. We 35 shows, we've done about half Black, half white. We try to keep it about equal. So he writes, it was the best day of his life. Okay, so we know this just changes you. We have 700,000 kids see the Kinsey collection. We've been to China, you know, I mean, we translated in Spanish and in English, you follow me? Our collection. So what we've done, we built this to travel. We built it to be something that could be transformative. And that's exactly what's happening.
In Tacoma, to the Renton School District, to their credit, they had, I think it was 1,200 fifth graders come through the museum. And Khalil was able to do several tours while he was there. And we just got a note yesterday. We just
got a big package. All these fifth graders writing us, doing drawings of the Kinsey collection. It's pretty extraordinary. So our lives are just rich and full. First of all, Khalil Kinsey is just genius. When you go to SoFi, you're going to see 100,000 square feet of the Kinsey collection. I did not misspeak. I didn't say 10,000. I said 100,000 square feet of Black people in SoFi Stadium. It's pretty amazing. Yeah. And we have animation. I'm just so proud of Khalil. Larry Earl is one of our key staff managers and historian. And what we've created there is an immersive experience where you come in and you're going to see, we're going to have our images dancing on the wall and doing things that they weren't necessarily supposed to do. Because what we really want to do is to reach out and touch the young people. We have a community engagement program with SoFi to go into the Englewood, Hawthorne area and to expose our kids and young people on who they are and where they came from. So, I mean, all I can say is 55 years here with Khalil. I mean, it's just a wonderful thing. Khalil is to travel as a family, as a Black family, doing what we do, okay? And doing it as a business. This is not a nonprofit business. This is a business. And we've created it, we scaled it, and now it's flourishing. And guess what? When we're gone, our son Khalil, this is his business because he's a Kinsey. And he's going to take this to places that we would have never thought he could take it because he's already doing it.
Well, I just want to say, you know, obviously something to be so proud of as a family, as members of this community. I can't wait to see the exhibit at SoFi Stadium. Encourage everyone, if you don't get a chance, because you're not going to the Super Bowl to see it, you can still visit it at SoFi Stadium. You can go to the Pepperdine exhibit. The Kinsey book is on their website. You can check out the book on the website and learn more about this amazing project and the exhibit. Thank you so much, Shirley and Bernard, for sharing your family history and for this wonderful exhibit. Truly appreciate sitting down with both of you this morning.
Appreciate you. Continue to do well.
Thank you for doing what you do. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, guys. All right, my next guest, she's a creator of a virtual Black History Museum powered by Microsoft. Her name is Shai Averett. She's a global senior community program and events manager at Microsoft and the creator of Microsoft's The Legacy Project, a one-of-a-kind virtual Black History Month museum celebrating 21st century Black change makers. Good morning and welcome, Shai.
Good morning.
Full disclosure, I was honored to be inducted into this virtual museum experience. So I just want to get that out before we start this interview. That's not why I'm excited about it. I'm excited about it because I think it's just so amazing when you think about what Bernard and Shirley are doing with this traveling exhibit. Microsoft had the ingenuity, or you had the ingenuity to think about how you can reach people virtually, particularly since so many of us are spending our lives on Zoom. So Shai, tell us what was the catalyst for you to come up with the Legacy Project?
Last year, we were meeting with a lot of schools and they were telling us that was the one area they wanted us to lean in the most was Black history and some of our cultural moments. So initially we went around in the pandemic and virtualized 13 existing museums so students could go through. And as we begin to finish up that process, it came to me, I'm like, this history is amazing. I was like, but I want to make sure that these young people understand that Black history is alive, is well, is being made every single day. So I went to my team and I was like, what if we just try to create a little small gallery or something just to honor some people who are doing some great things today and can just add a different level of inspiration for the students. So last year we had one small room that had, I think, like 23 people, and we thought it was amazing. We were really excited about it. But this year, and just as you were speaking already, we talked to so many teachers who were saying, hey, we can't talk about Selma, we can't talk about Black Wall Street, we can't talk about anything dealing with race. So in my mind, I said, hey, I want to keep that because there are schools that can still, learn Black history in the most rich and proper way. But I also wanted to go bigger on the honoree side, really more just for some of those schools that can't, talk about race or anything of that sort, could have a way to still celebrate Black history. So,
well, we have the ability to show on the screen what this virtual museum looks like. So kind of walk us through, Shai, what we're seeing. So go back to the first screen, Shai, so we can see when you come into this museum, you're going to see the exhibits that you get to visit.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. So
yeah.
Tell us what we're looking at, Shai.
All right, awesome. So the left side is our history wing. We have 3 different galleries on Africa. So one on just the wonders of Africa, one is on the cultures and the riches of Africa. And both of those, really the heart of that was, so many of the young people, one, think that Africa is a country and don't even understand that it's a continent. And what they see on TV does not even halfway do justice how beautiful and amazing. And I mean, especially for African-American kids, I want them to be proud of where their ancestors come from. And I think the way sometimes it's displayed on TV, it's not. So it's really just all about redefining and changing the narrative of what Africa is. We work with our amazing team in Canada and just talked about the long road to freedom and Canadians' role in the Underground Railroad. And then my favorite one, our team spent a couple of weeks in Tulsa meeting with the remaining survivors and their family in the Greenwood Cultural Center to rebuild and recreate. It is my favorite piece in here is the Black Wall Street and Tulsa Massacre walking tour. So that's all on the history side. And then we go on our honorary side.
Can you bring up the Tulsa? Can we walk through that? Can we see?
Yeah.
It's gonna kill me if let's see if this technology works.
Yeah.
I know yours works. It's just, can we get it to work? Okay, there you go. Okay.
Yeah. So it's interesting because it starts off right here, and this is as close as we can get to what the buildings actually look like, the windows. I mean, we were very, very, very detailed to make sure that we told the story properly. There's pop-ups on every building, and this is just the marquee block of Black Wall Street. So it talks about the owners, it talks about the buildings, it talks about some of the amazing things that happen. But when you leave this first section, it actually takes you downtown Tulsa, and you start at the Drexel building where the elevator incident happens, and it takes you from there to the police station, to the courthouse, to the rioting begins, and then you come back to Black Wall Street and you see it really in ruins. So it is to go through it all. We've had students crying. My best friend called me at 1 a.m. and I thought something was wrong. She was like, it hit her because she went through the whole thing and really got a chance to really think about what they went through.
We see the buildings burning. Okay.
Yeah. Oh no, it's there's sound effects. It's all of it. And we wanted to take people through that full story, and not just talk about the Tulsa Massacre, but the beauty of Black Wall Street, it was just amazing. And it's something we don't talk about enough, which is why we kind of expanded it out and made sure that we talked about both parts. So.
Wow. And so, okay, so that's one side. Now tell us about the other side. If we go back, Rashad, to the entrance to the museum. So, I mean, it's really like you're having this virtual experience. You're actually like walking through the door of a museum and you're getting to choose which galleries you want to visit at any given time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And on our right side, so those are our honorees. We have 6 different galleries around business, education, justice, youth, entertainment, sports, technology. And each gallery has probably around 20 plus honorees in it. And they are some of the most amazing Black and African American change makers of today who are doing some just amazing things in their own field. So each gallery, if you click on a photo, their bio pops up, it'll read it out loud. We have videos from some individuals. So if you go to the entertainment gallery, probably one of my favorite videos, John Legend did a spectacular video on why teaching Black history is so important. And even though they're trying to take it away from the schools, like it is something that is needed. So we have a lot of different videos, there's interaction, there's you, and there's bios, all that different type of stuff. So it's really engaging and interactive, and people get to click and they either get to hear from the individuals or at least hear their bio and hear about their accomplishments.
Wow. So how are you getting this out, Shai, to schools? Are you just offering, obviously it's free because it's online, everybody can access it. But is there a whole outreach program to make sure that, thousands of schools across this country have their kids visit?
Yeah, absolutely. So our team, we're small and mighty, but we're super grassroots. So like every month we try to add hundreds of schools to our database, especially those in underserved areas and that are Title I schools that we know don't have resources. So right now we have over 1 million students are registered to go through the experience just in the month of February. So we're pretty excited, but it is 100%, yes, it's free. A school can request a private tour. That's all still free. So we give them a tour guide and walk them through and guide them and ask questions to make it more interactive as well. So yeah, that's still open all the way. And we do this all year round. The museum is not going away in February. We launch it in February, and then it gets an update next February with some new folks and some new galleries and things of that sort.
So what's the long-term plan, Shai? Because you said, I know it started in 2020, now that's 2021, we're in 2022. Yeah. Where do you see this going? Because obviously, because it's virtual, there seems to be no limit to how big.
There's absolutely no limit. I'm super, it's funny, every year my vision of it expands. So I don't even have a clear vision of what's going to happen next year. My team is frightened because they're like, this was good. Let's just stop here. But even there's a lot of, I think we talked a little bit about the walking tour that we did of Selma. Like all of those experiences are going to be moved into this one space because we've done so many things individually. And now we have kind of a home in the sense where we can land all of our Black history content that we will celebrate all year round. So I'm already thinking, I'm like, okay, what's going to be the next moment or what's going to be those next things that we're going to create galleries we're already starting our list of honorees for next year that we're going to add to the museum. So it's probably just going to be an additional floor. So every year it's going to be massive eventually in the next 10 years. So, but we're excited and everyone deserves to be honored. They're doing some amazing things. And the stories we're hearing from the students in regards to like, well, I didn't know I wanted to be that. And I didn't realize that somebody else. And that's really what it's all about at the end of the day. We want young people and adults to walk away and say, these people are creating an amazing legacy. So what is mine going to be? And that's really kind of the heart of the project.
So Microsoft, big tech company, you don't typically think of a big tech company creating a museum of this nature and pouring in the resources into obviously, make this happen and to grow it. So was it, did you face any resistance when you went to your bosses saying, look, this is something we want to do?
Nope. It's one of the things. I am so blessed to have the most amazing boss ever where her heart connects with mine when it comes down to just taking care of people. So I've never had to over-explain, right? I don't even think you may have saw it before she did, the finished product, right? Like, because literally I'm like, I'm working on Black History Month. And she's like, let me know what you need. It's one of those where she trusts me. She trusts my heart. She trusts my intent. She know why I'm doing it. And because the why doesn't change. She doesn't, she's never concerned about which way I'm going to go because she know I'm going to land right where I'm supposed to be. So no, she did not. When I showed it to her, she got even more excited. So that's the beauty. I am extremely grateful and blessed for the boss that I have because she gets it. Even if no one else does, she does. And that's what counts right now because she's my boss. So yeah.
Absolutely, that matters. What's been the response, Shai, from other employees within Microsoft? How have they received the museum?
Oh, they love it. And it's beautiful because, I have teams reaching out or a VP or a director saying, hey, I want to take my team through the Africa Gallery. Can we use that as one of our Black history experiences? Or we're going to cancel our team meeting and can you have somebody walk us through Tulsa? Or, so it's, I love it because ultimately, as much as I wanted to inspire, African-American students, it was also about changing the narrative. And making sure that if you had the wrong perception of our beautiful and amazing culture and race, I wanted that to change, right? So even individuals that are not African American and Black who are emailing and saying, I love the fact that when whether or not they're in Boss Moves or Justice or Education or Sports, or whether or not they're going through Black Wall Street, they're going to leave with a greater, if they have an open mind, a greater appreciation and understanding of just how amazing our race and culture is and the contributions that we have made, not to Black history, but to American history. So they're loving it. I love that they're loving it. And I love how accessible it is as well. So.
Yeah, I love that you're going to bring those immersive experiences in to the main museum now, and you're going to have one place where you can go and not just learn about these change makers in Africa, but also be able to have those experiences. I read a lot about those other experiences where literally you can hit a baseball with Jackie Robinson, go on a march with Dr. King, the Selma march that Dr. King did. I think that's also going to only enhance what you guys have already created. Those kinds of experiences. We know young people really get into, those virtual experiences. I think is going to even draw them in more to the project. But thank you so much for sharing it. Thank you for having the creative mind to create something like this. We've all got to, get real creative in how we make sure our history is preserved.
Absolutely.
And how it's taught. And we know putting something online, I mean, that's where kids are, right? So no matter what's happening in those classrooms, kids are online. So they're going to find this and they're going to learn so much again, and their lives will be enriched as a result of it. But thank you again, Shai, for the work that you are doing. And thanks to Microsoft for allowing you to create this really amazing project.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, now my next guest is Dr. Cherise Smith. She's a professor of art history and African diaspora studies at the University of Texas. She's the author of a book, Michael Ray Charles, Studies in Blackness. It's only one of her books, but she's also the executive director of the art galleries at Black Studies at the university. Good morning and welcome, Dr. Smith.
Morning, thanks for having me.
So we started the show with Bernard and Shirley Kinsey, who has this moving exhibit that travels throughout the world, really, and is able to be viewed by people at colleges and now at SoFi Stadium, where the Super Bowl is going to be played, and other museums. And then we talked to Shai at Microsoft, who has a virtual Black History experience. Tell us why both of these experiences or museum types are so important.
So I would just say that it is just terribly important for people of color, African Americans in particular, to go to museums, whether they're history museums or art museums, and to feel comfortable in them, to know that they also belong to us and not just the very wealthy or only white people. And so it represents the fact that we have been in this country for centuries, that our culture matters, that the things that we produce matter, that knowledge about us matters. And so that's why it's deeply important that these exhibitions are happening, that their collection exists, that it is traveling around, but also that there are other museums around the country and collectors around the country that do the same thing to make their collections and objects available. One thing I hope that we'll be able to talk about is one can collect art, one can collect artifacts. It is not something that is solely for the wealthy. So I want to make a pitch and a plug there.
Oh, I love that. Go ahead. Tell us how we could all be collectors. I love that thought.
Absolutely. So, there are galleries in every city. One can go to a gallery and collect art that way. One can go to a university exhibition and see what the students there are creating and acquire objects that way. And of course, there are art festivals that happen, different kinds of art festivals that happen all over the country all of the time. And so I would just advocate for people to try to buy original art by Black people. It exists out there, and it is not, all of it, I should say, is not out of range.
Mm-hmm. And why in this moment, it feels like, Dr. Smith, at a time when state legislators around the country are trying to really eliminate the teaching of Black history in schools, how are we going to fight back against that and make sure that this history is preserved?
Gosh, I think that there's a little hope in the fact that this phrase, critical race theory, which does mean something, has been taken out of context by the right in particular. And so, when we think about Black studies or Mexican American studies or Native American studies, these are things that might be under the broad heading of critical race theory, but they have a different name. So they are continuing to be taught there throughout the country as they rightfully should be, because all of us, ethnic, racial minorities, among others, have contributed and belong in this country. It's a real challenge. I think that unfortunately, the right has learned from the left to use and to claim certain language like critical race theory that they can denigrate. But that doesn't mean that we can't still practice it. We should, of course, still practice it. And the collections that you are showcasing today make it possible for elementary, secondary, even university students to continue to do and to learn about this important work.
Yeah. Do you have any concern that, as the Black History Month in particular, as people move away from school, they move away from college, that their focus on Black History Month, becomes pretty distant, or people get really separated from the concept of even acknowledging Black History Month? So few people know the history of Black History Month. So few people, as we talked about earlier in the show, know any Black figures other than Rosa Parks and Dr. King. I actually had an employee who told me that in her history class in high school, those were the only two African American figures that she learned about, and that she had no idea until like a year ago when we started having this big conversation about racial reckoning, that there were so many African Americans, historical figures that she had never heard of. So you're on a college campus. Black History Month, I'm sure, is celebrated with lectures and, opportunities for people to learn about history. But once you get out into the working world, those opportunities cease to exist for the most part unless you seek them out. So how can we keep people connected to learning about our history, not just during Black History Month, but throughout the year, but especially we do have this 1 month set aside. It seems like even, it's a struggle in this 1 month.
Absolutely. I'm a firm believer, as I'm sure all of the guests are today, and you, that Black History Month is not sufficient. It needs to be every single day of the entire year. And not only Black history, but different histories of people who participated in the building and the shaping of this country. I think that there are, in some ways, more ways than ever to tap into and participate in Black culture and history. And I think about how on streaming services forever, for example, there are, Black voices on Prime or on Netflix. And so in some ways, it's making it a little easier to find this content in those kinds of popular places. I think that also there are many more exhibitions of Black culture and history, like the National Museum of African American History and Culture in the Washington, D.C. at the Smithsonian, that make it possible for people to go more regularly. So we do need to continue this.
Yeah, tell us Professor, about the gallery that you are responsible for at the University of Texas.
Yeah, thank you. So they are called the Art Galleries of Black Studies. We have two spaces. They are within the College of Liberal Arts at the University of Texas. One space is a beautiful, what we call a white box space that looks like a traditional museum, with hardwood floors, white walls, movable walls so that we can have different designs. A second space is within the Black and Latino Studies building, which at UT is called the Gordon White Building. And it is a more casual space that is with classrooms, that is with offices, with lecture spaces. And so just imagine what it's like for students who come into a building that is Black and Latino Studies to have art relating to their culture on display all of the time. And the Christian Green Gallery, which I mentioned a moment ago, is in one of the largest student activity centers and dorms in the country. So it is adjacent to 2,000 undergraduate students, among other people, the larger Austin community and further out, who are able to come and see fantastic exhibitions of African American and more broadly, African descended art. Mm-hmm. And what I found when I came to the University of Texas about 15 years ago was that there were very few places where African American art and culture were being taken seriously in Austin, Texas. And so there were a couple of things that I sought out to do. The first was to bring more artists of color to campus. I started a lecture series and invited them to interact, the artists to interact with people on campus, give lectures and study with students who were studying art and art history. A second thing that I did was to establish these exhibition spaces. A third thing is to have more students of color and students of African descent in particular study art and art history. It is a field that has and continues to be a very white, kind of monochromatic field, monotone field. There are many of us who are training students of color to go in and make knowledge about Black artists and Black culture. And then the last thing that I want to mention, and this ties back to the Kinsey collection, is that the University of Texas is a very wealthy institution that has fantastic resources. There's the Harry Ransom Center, the Briscoe Center, Benson, Blanton Museum, Art Galleries of Black Studies. What I noticed was that there was a critical paucity or lack of Black art and culture in the repositories, in the collections of these very well-known, important institutions. And so it became one of my goals to integrate these collections, and that is to advocate for these museums and libraries to begin to acquire and purchase more works and or objects by and made by Black people. And that's been, one of the most important things that our Art and Archive Initiative has done.
Yeah, and Bernard mentioned there are like 14,000 museums across the country, and he asked a good question when you go into those museums to ask if they have any African American art or African art, or when's the last time they had a Black art exhibit. Do you see those museums changing? He said museums are some of the most racist institutions in this country.
Yeah.
I don't doubt that. But do you see any changes happening, particularly, after the murder of George Floyd, when we're in this, conversation about racial reckoning? Do you see it changing at all?
Absolutely. So there has been a push, and I would say probably the last 5 to 7 years, to have many more exhibitions by artists of color, Black artists in particular, here in the United States. There have been major exhibitions of artists who are deceased, like Charles White, and of artists who are still alive. And I'm thinking here of Betty Saar, Howardina Pindell. These are artists in their 70s and 80s who should rightfully have had more recognition when they were younger people. And having said that, there are younger artists who are doing quite well, showing their work in a more consistent way than has happened in the past. Yes. The kind of flip side of that is that a lot of art is being purchased right now by museums and collectors, by African American artists, which has some people worried that there's a bit of a bubble that is happening right now, wherein Black artists are, kind of the flavor of the year or the flavor of the month, and that collectors will turn their back on them at a different time and go toward another area. And so, there is a bit of concern in the Black art world because of that.
Wow. Well, I just want to thank you for the work that you're doing and for getting, into Texas and deciding that it needed to be more diverse and that you needed to bring more Black artists to campus and more Black art to the galleries there. Obviously, that's how change happens, right? It starts with one person recognizing a void and then stepping into that void to make a change. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing, and thank you for enlightening us on why it's so important for us to visit art museums, history museums, and then to collect. I think that's a really great idea that I'm going to start thinking more seriously about myself. Appreciate you, Dr. Smith, for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much.
I want to thank all of my guests this morning, and thanks to all of you for joining me today. I just love the fact that we can talk about preserving Black history and do so with folks who are doing it in completely different ways. So if you have the ability to go to an art museum in your city or town, please do so. This is the month that you want to visit and find those Black art exhibits. But if you can't make it to an art museum because of COVID, because of transportation, or because of your work schedule, visit that Microsoft online museum. It's really cool. And in addition to the legacy project that Shai talked about, there are those separate immersive experiences that Microsoft has created that are going to be incorporated into the main museum project that she and Microsoft have created. So there's absolutely positively no reason whatsoever that anyone should not know Black history and know somebody other than Rosa Parks and Dr. King. Yes, we love them very much, but they are just a tiny, tiny fraction of the history makers who have contributed to the building and the thriving of this country. So this is Black History Month. What better time than today to learn about those historical figures who have helped to shape this country? Now, my words to live by. I'm going to give you 5 reasons why it's critically important to know your history. And in this case, I'm going to say your Black history. Number 1, history helps us build a better understanding of the world. Yes, if you know your Black history, you'll understand the contributions that Black folks have made to this country and to the world. Number 2, history helps us make better decisions about the present and the future. That's why we're having these discussions about institutional racism. And you can't really have those conversations in an intelligent and rational way unless you know the history of Blacks in this country. Number 3, studying history can improve your critical thinking skills. Yes, you'll become smarter. You'll be more knowledgeable. You'll be able to discern things better by studying history. Number 4, understanding history can protect you from falling prey to fake conspiracy theories. Yes, when you know the history, when you know the facts, you will not be subject to all of those false, fallacious, made-up stories that are on the internet. You'll see them, you'll be able to reject them because you'll have the facts. And number 5, history shapes your individual identity and our national identity. I've had so many historians on, so many writers and authors who talk about how they've traced their own history and in doing so, learned so much about themselves and their families. Yes, knowing your history helps you know and better understand yourself, your family, and your community. All right, that's it. It's Black History Month. Know your history. I'm out. Y'all be safe out there. Wear your mask, get your booster, and remember, we're all in this together.